Are you a solopreneur looking to 2 times your revenue to fund your lifestyle and give back? Well, this podcast is for you. We bring you inspirational guests sharing actionable tips to solve many of the struggles you face each and every day. And now over to your host, Paul Higgins.
Hello to the Build, Live, Give podcast. If you're a first-time listener, welcome. And if you enjoy it, please subscribe. If you're a regular, thanks for your support. Love to get your feedback at paul@buildlivegive.com. It means the world to me when you do. Our guest today is someone who has had numerous sales roles whilst pursuing his musical career. He realised all the marketing effort behind making a very successful band was more lucrative if he focused it on businesses. So now he helps thought leaders, coaches and consultants to launch and produce podcasts. So why listen? He gives the one step which will make or break your podcast, the 2 formats for podcasting and the benefits of each, and a brilliant way to guest on top podcasts in your space. They have also kindly given a free audiobook on how to be in the top 1 to 5% of successful thought leadership podcasts. So what I'll do now is hand you over to Matt Johnson. Welcome, Matt Johnson, to the Build, Live, Give podcast. Brilliant having you on, Matt.
I'm super excited to be here. Thanks, Paul.
Look, you really sound, well, you don't sound like one, but it feels like you're an Australian because everyone in Australia shortens their name, right? But I find the US, not everyone does, but you've gone straight there and shortened your name. Matt, I love it.
Well, I haven't let an adult call me by my full name since I was 5 years old.
Not even your mum and dad?
No, not even mom and dad.
Oh, that's great. Look, my mum, made it very simple. Paul for me and Mark for my brother, so you couldn't shorten it. But here in Australia, everyone normally shortens it and adds an O to it. So for me, I'm Higo based on my surname because Paulo just doesn't sound quite as good. But I love it. I always ask someone in the US because here in Australia, it's just default. We just shorten everything.
That's hilarious.
Look, love to start with something that your family or friends know about you that we may not.
Okay. Well, the easiest thing is that I used to have hair down past my shoulders.
Wow.
What people, they might know if they follow me on Facebook or something is that I'm a musician, but they probably wouldn't know that I was a musician that was in 4 different bands chasing the dream up until about 5 or 6 years ago. And I got a job at my old agency. I cut my hair off, and even I had the whole goth look with the black nails and everything. I literally took off the black nail polish the day I went in for the interview at my old marketing agency. Wow. And what type of musician? What do you do? I play drums and piano. So I was in a couple of different groups, and the one that was the most successful was an acoustic duo where I played piano, and that actually got signed to management and pitched to record labels. But and we cranked out one album that I'm really proud of, and that was the end of it.
Brilliant. And what do you think brought about the end of it? Was it, Oh,
I'll tell you exactly what it was. It was the fact that I woke up to the reality of how music is marketed and realized that the skills that I had built to market my music, which included building websites and social media and things like that, were way more lucrative and enjoyable when applied in the business world. And then I could probably just go there and make a great lifestyle and do music as a passion project. And that's true. Yeah. The business that I run today, I run the agency in 4 to 6 hours a week. Now, it's taken me a while to get there, but now that I am there, I actually do have the time to turn my attention back to music again, which is really fun.
Brilliant. And, do you play the same without the goth look?
Yes. Fortunately, the talent didn't go its way with the hair and the goth look.
Excellent. Well, I'm looking at your photo here on Zoom and I'm thinking, I just can't picture it. But anyway.
My dad said I look like an extra from the Allman Brothers.
Great. Well, look, I know, you've had a fantastic background in sales. You've been in multiple industries. I think what was your first time out on your own in 2011 when you set up an event management company?
The first time I was out probably as an entrepreneur was in 2007, setting up a real estate team, which is what led to getting my position at the old agency. So yeah, it was a roundabout way, but I wasn't really entrepreneurial necessarily. I intended to be, a couple of different things, but business owner wasn't really one of them. But I did start a business, and that went well enough that years later, when I got into the marketing side of it, I got into it in the same industry. And so that kind of paved the way for all the good things that ended up happening out of that relationship. I'm not one of those people that has the story of selling candy and flipping it for a profit at 13. I'm literally the exact opposite. I didn't give that much of a second thought, even though the whole time I was reading business and marketing books, not intending to go into it, but just because they fascinated.
Yeah, and what was the turning point to go into it?
The turning point to go into business for myself was hitting a point at my old agency where I felt like I wasn't growing and I needed to go out on my own as an independent consultant, kind of a solopreneur. And it just so happened that one of the clients of our agency was looking for somebody to help him grow his coaching consulting business. And the timing of it worked. Everything just kind of fell into place. And I went from being an employee thinking I would be at that agency for the next couple of decades to all of a sudden being a freelance consultant. It wasn't necessarily a master plan, but I was so driven to do something and build something on my own that it just kind of went that direction, because I just don't think in the end it would have gone any other way. It had to go that way.
Right. And was it easier or harder than you expected?
Definitely harder in a lot of senses, because building a business, and you know this, is never a straight line, and there is way more failure and discomfort in it than people will tell you if they're trying to persuade you to buy a coaching program. Let's put it that way.
So true.
That's not to say that coaching programs aren't good, because they are. They're really, really good. But it's the people that are the problem. We get hung up on things like, well, I don't want to get known for that, and I don't know if I want to sell that, and I don't know if I want to do this for the rest of my life. We get hung up on all these other things that keep us from just doing what people will happily and gladly pay for. And I had it myself. I literally had a moment where the guy that I used to work for, who's still one of my best friends, came to me and said, it basically verbally slapped me and said, look, why are you not doing this full time? Like, you're running this amazing podcast, you're getting all this great feedback, things are growing really well. Why are you not offering this as a package to other people? And I just said, you're right, because I'm in 3 or 4 other businesses trying to chase this, maximize this industry I'm in. And I had this idea in my head that if I got into 3 or 4 businesses, it was like I had all these different things to sell people. And I got away from just that idea of having one thing to sell to one perfect type of person. And everything changed when I went back to that and said, okay, I'm going to get out of everything else. I'm going to get out of the 4 businesses I'm in. I'm going to focus on the one where I have 100% ownership. And I'm going to sell one thing to one type of person. And I'm going to make it my mission to figure out what that one type of person and what that one service is. That was really the turning point for me.
Yeah, and I think, I love that quote from Good to Great. I always bastardize it a little, but it's, the hedgehog versus the fox. And I do see, I was one of them. So now, and it's always easier the second time around, right? Mm-hmm. But yeah, same thing, had so many cunning plans. But, the hedgehog it just does one thing, and the fox is never going to get that hedgehog. So, look, I think, I totally agree with where you got to. And, you said your friend gave you some, a great nudge there. Who else has supported you in this transition?
Well, that's been the great part, is once you get into this world of coaches, consultants, and thought leaders, those people I'm fortunate to call my friends, but a lot of them have been my clients, and they're also my strategic referral partners. And yeah, it's a really cool, very, very small world. The top, let's say 1 to 5% of an industry, they all know each other. And once you get up to that realm of thought leadership in a space, a lot of times the top 1 to 5% in a bunch of other industries too, because you all go to the same conferences, you all get featured on the same podcasts, a ton of the same vendors and marketing agencies that serve that crowd. And so once you break into that top 1% in one industry, it makes it a lot easier to kind of leapfrog over and meet all the thought leaders in a bunch of other spaces. So that's what happened to me. I started off in real estate. That led to mortgage. That led to financial services. That led to executive recruiting, not by any specific intent on my part. It was because I knew what type of person I wanted to work with. And once I found them in one space, they just tended to be friends with similar people in other spaces.
Yeah. And what's the difference? You worked with the top 1%. What's the difference between a top 1% thought leader and all of the rest of us?
So a really good example is one of my clients who runs a string of real estate offices in the Southeast in the States, and they do like $8 million in gross commissions a year. It's absolutely ridiculous. He is one of the most long-term thinkers I know. So if there's one thing that the really successful have over everyone else, even the moderately successful, it's the really, really successful people have a 5 and 10 year outlook. And so the stuff that they're doing now, and even the stuff that's difficult and painful for them to do now, they don't get a reward 6 months from now. They might get a reward 5 years from now, but they could do it anyway. And that's not easy to do, but it is a muscle that can be built over time. I'm working on it right now. And I think most of the people that are on their way up, or maybe just hit that level of success and can't figure out how to break through, a lot of times when you dig in, you'll find it's because everything they're doing now is for a payoff. They're hoping for a payoff today. Maybe they can wait till next month, but man, if it doesn't come next month, they're out. They're on to the next thing.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And, I learned that at the Coke company. The Coke company, were always, because they're 150 years old, lots of money, but they just always taught you, what's it going to look like in 10, 20 years,
Yeah.
Work on the business, not in the business, that classic saying. So look, we'll go into the build section because I'm so excited to learn more about what you do. So when someone asks you, hey, Matt, what do you do? How do you answer it?
So easy answer is we launch and produce podcasts for business coaches and consultants. And we just basically do everything so they can show up and do what they do best, and we do the rest.
Brilliant. Why didn't I meet you a lot earlier? having done it all myself the hard way.
Oh, I know, me too.
I could have saved myself a lot of time and headaches. And, what do you know about launching and producing podcasts that many don't?
I think it's that most of the battles for podcast growth are won and lost before a show ever hits iTunes. I think most people have the idea that if they just get something out there and promote it on social media, they're active, they talk to people, they post about it on Facebook, they post about it on Twitter, and that if they just do that more, more flurries of activity, that will end up making their show successful. And I find that the opposite is true. It's the people that do the most homework up front that have the best, they make good decisions, good, clear, strategic decisions, and they launch a podcast that aligns well with a business that's positioned to grow in their niche and even become the number one kind of company in that niche. Those people actually end up building really successful podcasts. Now, they may not always have the most download numbers, but they generate the most revenue and the most profit, which is what I'm way more concerned with. And it's what, the people at the top 1% of an industry, that's what they're concerned with too. And so, yeah, it's if you follow what everyone else does, you'll get the same results they are. And we've got a lot of podcasts out there. As you know, there's 900,000 plus. The key thing is to spot the gap in the market. If you don't go for a gap in the market, you're just one of the many that sound like everyone else.
Great. And what are some of the questions you should ask yourself to spot that gap?
I think the biggest one is, and this really applies if you're in coaching consulting, who your ideal client is. Like, when someone shows up and they believe the same things that you believe, they know where you're going, they want to follow your leadership. So the key question for me is, what's the show that they wish they could find that just isn't out there right now, whatever that is for them? And that's the show that you've got to create. So it starts with your ideal clients. If you don't know who they are, you don't know what they want, then I wouldn't even worry about launching a podcast, because it'll end up just, an exercise in futility. It might be fun, let's put it that way, and it might even get downloads, but it won't serve a business purpose. But if you start from the inside out, you start with the people that you can have the most impact on, and you start talking to them and find out what podcasts they listen to and find out what they're dissatisfied with in those podcasts, that's where you'll get the clue of what's missing.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I sort of did the opposite. I'm a podcast junkie, so I listen to roughly 2 hours at 2.5 times speed a day. So, so I suppose that was my research, just listening to so many podcasts and working out what worked well for me, what didn't. Because when I started my podcast, I was my ideal client, corporate
that's
guy.
Way easier.
Correct. So that for me, I'm not saying that I always got it right, but it certainly helped. But I think that's great advice. And, for you around formats, so if you're going to start if you're a thought leader, coach, consultant, like, people listening right now, what are the sort of formats? What are some of the key structural questions you should be going through?
Well, the way that I see it is that there are two general kinds of podcasts that you can launch, or you can do something where it blends the two. And the two kinds are teaching and networking. So a networking podcast, we're pretty familiar with it. If you think about John Lee Dumas's podcast, Entrepreneur on Fire, there is no solo episodes for the most part. It's basically just John interviews entrepreneur, right? Great, on to the next. That's great for networking. It's great for building a strategic network of referral partners. It's great for, maybe even just flat out inviting the people on that you want to work with as guests and going straight after your ideal client. All really good ideas. But if you want to build a long-term thought leadership business, that's not enough, because it's extremely high-level skill set to build the ability to have an interview with somebody and convey your point of view in the process, right? Because what ends up happening is it's mostly about the guest. It's really hard. It's just a tough skill set to build. So it's important to have an element of your podcast that is a teaching component. Like, Paul, you've got your solo episodes. I've got the same thing on mine. I'm actually experimenting right now with splitting my podcast up into 2 different feeds and separating out the conversations and the teaching episodes and making them 2 completely different podcasts. You can see the same thing with Tim Ferriss with his new show. It's like the one that spotlights his Tools of Titans book, which my computer is sitting on right now. But it's basically him, right? It's him reading excerpts from his Tools of Titans book. There's no guest interviews, you know what I'm saying? So even he's doing that same thing right now. The other option is you can just blend all of that together into one show. And the only problem with that is that there's a lot of that. There's an oversupply of the podcasts out there where they're just a grab bag of whatever the host wants to talk about at that time. And there's not much of a customer journey or a client journey built into that podcast. So I think the more clear we can make it, the more defined our podcasts become, the easier it will be to cut through the noise in that world.
Yeah, look, I agree. And that's why I split it, because I always wanted to shine the light on you, the guest. So Matt, you, but people saying, but Paul, I don't know your views on things. So
yes.
yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. And I'd be really interested to see how you go with splitting the 2. I know for you, you've probably got the resources, but I'm sort of scratching my head thinking, oh, God, more work. But yeah, I'll follow you and love to know how that goes. What about, what's a podcast do for a thought leader? So, let's say you've gone to someone professionally like you, you've got it all happening. Then what? What comes after that? How do you really maximize off the back of a podcast?
Well, the first thing is use it as the bait and the platform to go get interviewed. And that's the first thing I tell everybody, whether you have a podcast or not. If you haven't started one yet, great, go out and get featured. If you have one and it's not growing as fast as you want, great, go get featured. If you're not getting as many speaking engagements you want, great, go get featured. It's like step 1 of everything. Like this whole world, there's such an underground world in podcasting that a lot of people don't tap into for whatever reason. I think a lot of people don't know that it's there. There's so few marketing vehicles where you get to spend any more than a few seconds with somebody. I see people spending hours crafting this amazing blog post and it just flies by on somebody's Facebook feed. And on top of that, we're in a world where Facebook is not doing us any favors anymore. And if your stuff doesn't get engagement, if you're not asking for people's opinions, man, that stuff gets buried in the algorithm so fast it makes your head spin. So we're in this really weird time where Facebook and Instagram are not doing us favors. We're essentially talking to the same 100 people that they're liking our stuff. That's who's seeing it, with a few exceptions. You may write a home run post every now and then. And then we're stuck between that and going and paying for traffic, and that's not something that's easy to make work. As I know, you have a lot of clients that are probably in that stage. And that is a 12 to 18 month experiment to make paid advertising work on Google pay-per-click or Facebook or LinkedIn. Like, that is a lot of work. And so people are kind of stuck in this middle ground. You and I talked about it before we started hitting record. There's so many people that generate business from their skills, right? So networking skills, speaking skills, in-person sales skills, that kind of thing. And then they try to go beyond that. And they're like, well, what is there? Like, either I'm posting organically 15 times a day on Instagram, or I got to go pay for and build a funnel. And to me, podcasting is that middle ground. So, pull back on the organic posting. It's not reaching as many people as it used to. Don't worry about the paid traffic for now. That can come in time. Go out and get featured on podcasts and look at starting your own, because there's a lot faster way to start getting results in your business quicker and start to reach more people than you can with just your individual one-on-one or your speaking skills. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And just a couple of quick tips on the best way to get in the door to a really good podcast.
Yeah. Well, you and I are both big fans of LinkedIn, right? So The first thing I would do is go to LinkedIn, type in podcast host, and look at your second level connections. So these are the people that are mutual friends of friends. And what you do is you go in, see if they're a podcast that fits your business. Then look at your mutual connections and see who you know that they know. Now, that could be someone they interviewed before. It could be maybe even someone that's a close friend of yours or theirs. You never know. But what I do when I reach out on LinkedIn is I pretty much always reach out to my extended network. I very rarely reach out to somebody truly cold on LinkedIn. It's almost always through mutual connections. So I'm reaching out, and you may have to get Sales Navigator to get enough, because they restricted email credits and stuff. So you can't just, message people out of the blue too often. But the first thing I do is I just message them with something very casual, very, very informal, and something that leverages the relationship that we have in common. So something like, hey, John, I noticed you're running a podcast in a similar circle. I saw that we both interviewed Ellen a few months back. That's really awesome. She's one of my favorite people. Hey, let me know if there's anyone in my network that you spot that I can make an introduction to. I'm happy to do it, Matt. And usually that is enough, because that's a very genuine message. I'm not asking for anything. I'm certainly not sending a 7-paragraph offer on the very first message out like you see sometimes on LinkedIn. In the right cases, if they're open to it, that's going to get me a response. And that's all I need, because then I can actually follow up on that and I actually can introduce them. That's the second thing, is if you're going to reach out to somebody and you make an offer that's genuine like that, and then you actually follow through on it, people are blown away, because most people don't follow through, and it's such a simple thing to do.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So we talked about, getting interviewed is one key benefit of having a podcast. What's another one?
Another key benefit is that you get to leverage the trust that podcast host has built up with their audience. So Paul, you've been running your podcast for hundreds of episodes. You have an audience that trusts you. So, you and I connect. And the next thing you know is I'm getting to spend 30 or 40 minutes speaking to your audience. And it's not just that you're putting an ad in front of them. What you're doing is you're introducing me in a way that builds trust and credibility in me, because you're sharing some of the trust and credibility of your own that you've built with your audience with me. So there's really no other marketing vehicle like that. I mean, you can't replicate that with Facebook ads. You can't replicate that by writing a viral post on Facebook or Instagram. It's nearly impossible to get any sort of trusted introduction at scale. But podcast interviews are the exception to that rule. It is literally a trusted introduction to hundreds or even thousands of people all at one time.
Yeah, it's gold. And just one more. What's one more key reason you would do a
podcast interviews?
Yeah.
Okay. So to me, podcasting is the new networking. And if there's one way to connect and raise your net worth, and you've heard all the sayings about your network is your net worth. And that's very true. The 5 people you spend the most time with is going to end up being the average of your income. I do believe that. So podcasting to me is the best way to meet that next level of people that can become some of your best friends. Like literally all of my best friends right now, with a couple of exceptions, are all people I've met through podcasting. The person I consider my business coach that's going to be in my life for the next 40 years, met him through podcasting. I've had clients that I literally lived with for weeks at a time that I met through podcasting. We've become that good of friends. The relationships that you build just from getting into this world of people that host podcasts and guest star on podcasts is literally life-changing. I can't put it any more strongly than that. It literally is life-changing.
Yeah, and look, I know that one of the benefits of having a brilliant killer asset like a podcast is that, it can help with the bridge from, as you said, conversations on LinkedIn into actually giving someone value, because, people love to be interviewed. Like you said, that gets them into your network, but it also gets out to others. How do you advise, or have you found good ways to use an asset like a podcast in LinkedIn?
Well, the no-brainer is to invite people onto your podcast. So the other way to do that right now is that it seems like LinkedIn, really short, fast edited videos seem to be working well on LinkedIn right now. Whether LinkedIn Live works, really well for the majority of people remains to be seen. Because not everybody is great at live video for a lot of reasons. But if you can put together a video that's a clip of your podcast and it's edited together nicely, you'll get a lot of great positive feedback. It catches the eye. It's something different. There's not a lot of people doing it on LinkedIn quite yet. And it gives you an outlet to build your credibility on LinkedIn, so that when you reach out through your messages and people go back and look at your profile, it's not just static. They can actually go see a video, or they can see an audiogram, which is the little waveform of the audio of your podcast. There's a bunch of different ways you can do it, but essentially, like you've mentioned in your show, like when you reach out on LinkedIn, the first thing they're going to do is go look at your profile. So you want your profile to be tricked out. And to me, a podcast is one of the best ways to do that. It gives you instant credibility. All the people you've interviewed end up becoming your connections. They end up leaving you recommendations and referrals. It's a really virtuous cycle that once you get into it, it's almost addictive. You'll realize, wow, this is incredibly powerful. And you'll probably do what I did, which is put the gas pedal down and start doing things even more intentionally.
And the last question in this section is, have you come across anyone where a podcast hasn't added them value? So they're a coach, they're a thought leader, and podcast is just not the right thing for them.
That's an interesting question. The best way to answer that is that there is a difference between people where it works like gangbusters and people where it doesn't seem to move the needle a lot. I mean, it's always beneficial and it helps them have conversations and it generates referrals. So there's such a baseline level where podcasting works for virtually anyone. But there is a difference between those and the people that it works like gangbusters for. And here's what I see as the difference. And this is why I wrote the book MicroFamous to begin with, is I was looking at my clients asking that same question. What's the difference between the gangbusters and everyone else? The difference is the people that use podcasting and end up dominating a niche is the people where their business model and their business strategy in general was positioned correctly. And then the podcast took that positioning and their message and it drove it into the marketplace over and over and over again to exactly the right people till it made them Tom Cruise famous in their space. That's the difference. So for the people that don't use podcasting that way, it can seem sluggish. You might think you need to build a big audience and go after sponsorships. I wouldn't bother with any of that. If you have the right business and it aligns with your podcast and your podcast delivers the right idea to the market over and over and over again, your podcast will absolutely work for you and generate a 10x ROI, which to me is what really counts.
Brilliant. Well, we're listening to Matt Johnson, and you can find out more about Matt at MicroFamous.com, and I think you've got a little gift coming up soon, so stay tuned for that one. But before we go into the live section, I'd like to show you how to get 3 to 5 new clients a month on LinkedIn by spending 30 minutes a day, even if you don't know where to start and have limited marketing funds. Just go to blgclick.com and watch a pre-recorded free masterclass. You'll learn the secret formula to 10x your views, 7 killer elements to get 50 likes and 20 comments on every post, certainly in the first 60 minutes, and the scripts to get 80% response rates to LinkedIn messages. And as Matt said, it's all happening on LinkedIn for business coaches and consultants and also thought leaders. So just go to blgclick.com, watch the free pre-recorded masterclass. And there's a lot of activities that happen on LinkedIn, moving parts that you don't have to do, which is fantastic. If you want to find more about getting some help with that, certainly from a VA perspective, a virtual assistant perspective, just go to buildlivegive.com/VA. So the next section is the live section. Matt, so what are some daily habits that help you be truly successful?
So the first thing I think is having a daily theme for the most part. So my weeks are structured in such a way that every day kind of has a purpose. Agency calls with the team are on one day. Most of my podcast recordings are on another day. So when I wake up in the morning, I kind of know what's going on just by what day of the week it is. So I'm mentally prepared for it. And everything is split up that way. And I've tinkered a lot with this to the point where now I take afternoons off. And basically anything afternoon that I do for work is optional. So I might come back and work an hour in the evening after a workout, or I might not. But basically I only schedule things between 7 a.m. and noon, Monday through Friday. And then I do a lot of the thinking and strategic planning in the mornings on the weekends. So I rarely do anything on the weekend mornings that's scheduled that takes me away from that strategic planning. So it's a way of getting around a lot of the scheduling problems a lot of other business owners have, where they find themselves unable to work on the business because they're so busy in it. So I've managed to pull myself out of that, but it has been a lot of experiments to find that routine, that rhythm. But man, once you find that rhythm, lean into it. And I was fortunate enough to find it. So that's the first thing.
Excellent. Well, look, the next section is the give section. So what's a charity or a community that you're passionate about and why?
Well, the community I'm passionate about is up and coming entrepreneurs and solopreneurs. And one of the great things about running the agency the way that I do is we run an internship program. It's kind of a hybrid paid. So they go through the training that's unpaid, and then we bring them right away into an internship where they do things like pitch me or pitch clients on podcasts, or they learn how to do guest booking for our podcast clients. And they start at the ground floor of that. And what's cool about that is just the fruit that bears. So, for example, one of our account managers who works with our podcast clients, I've been helping him for about the last year set up his own audio production company because he's an engineer based in Nashville. And so he got this amazing opportunity to go be a producer on like a big time podcast on one of the networks. And so not only do we get to help him transition out into owning his own business, but then we get to take someone from my internship program, promote her into his place, and position her to do the same thing. And I've helped other people within the agency do that. So that's really, really, really rewarding. And it's really cool to be able to build that into the structure of the business. So you don't feel like you're running the business just to make money, and then your charitable stuff is the stuff you do with your money. I love being able to integrate the giving like literally into the structure of the business, because it also just solves the talent problem for me. So it hits like 3 birds with one stone.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And look, I give all the proceeds to my book to the Purple House. So you can go to the purplehouse.org.au to find out more. So the last section's the action section, where I'll ask you some rapid fire questions and get some rapid fire responses. So the first one is, what are your top 3 effectiveness tips?
So first one would be hire somebody today. One of the best things I ever did was hire a virtual assistant in the Philippines before I was really ready for one, because it forced me to look at my own hours and my pay per hour. And you hear about this from business coaches all the time, but so many people just don't follow the advice. But if you hire someone and you commit to paying them a certain number of hours a week, you will find something for them to do. It will be something you shouldn't be doing, and it will force you right away to start creating systems. And that's been the key to freedom. Like, to me, systems come first, then good people, and then you have a business that is absolutely rock solid.
Brilliant. Number 2,
start early. So I used to do calls at 7 a.m. I don't do them quite as much anymore with the COVID stuff going on. The schedules have shifted. But for a long time there, I started most of my calls at 7 a.m. in the morning, especially with the team, whenever I could. I live on the west coast of the state, so everybody else is a couple hours ahead of me anyway. So if you do that, and it just forces yourself to kind of kick your brain into gear, and you learn how to do it right off the bat first thing in the morning, no excuses. And that sets you up for a pretty good day. And then it allows you to do, if you want to, what I do, which is then at that crash when most people start getting low energy and low mental sharpness around 2 to 4 o'clock in the afternoon, that work is then optional. So you're not, on important calls and making critical decisions when your decision fatigue is in high gear.
Excellent. And the last one?
I think the last one is regularly scheduled calls. And this applies whether you're dealing with clients in a coaching consulting capacity, applies whether it's people on your team. Never let that slip. I've been talking to my head of content. We realized this the other day. She's been with me for 4 years. With very, very rare exceptions, mostly family emergencies or the occasional holiday, I have talked to her every single Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock for the last 4 years. And it's insane what that does to the stability of your business, but also to your own mentality and to the expectations of your team. When you show up and you're that reliable and you're on time and you're on point and you're mentally in it every single week at the same time, that just raises the standard for everybody on your team, everybody you work with, every client you ever take on. It increases your confidence in yourself. There's just the number of good effects are more than can be named. So that's my third one.
And what's a piece of tech, which is essential for you to run your business?
We run everything on Trello. I absolutely love Trello. It's a project management tool. If you're not familiar with it, it's probably the most visual project management tool I've ever worked with. And so it allows us to manage everything from an overhead view. We track all of our clients on it. I track every single project on it. My own productivity is my little, my to-do list is not a list anymore. It's a Trello board. I cannot recommend it highly enough.
Excellent. And what's the best source of new ideas for you other than, producing all those brilliant podcasts?
Well, I was going to say that actually is probably the best one, right up there as books. When you get to talk to the people that write the books, that's pretty cool. But yeah, I've always been a big reader, and my best ideas probably come from reading a lot, walking away, and just letting those concepts simmer and percolate together. And then all of a sudden something will occur to me 2 weeks later that I probably got out of a book and didn't realize it at the time.
Excellent. The last question is the big one. I always leave it to the end. So what impact do you want to leave on the world?
Yeah, love the question. So the reason I started the agency and the reason I continue to run it is that I want to help launch thought leaders. So where I get my sense of fulfillment and where the impact that we'll make on the world is, I want to bring people that have amazing content that can change other people's lives, who right now are sitting on the sidelines, not reaching the people that they're meant to reach, not making the change they're meant to make, all those sorts of things. And I want to help bring them and connect them with the audience who should love them if they only knew they existed. So that's where I get my sense of impact.
Brilliant. Absolutely love this. I really wish we could go on forever, but I want to, respect viewers to the time that you're listening out there. So what Matt has kindly given us is a free digital book, which is brilliant. And, where he talked about, dominating that niche. Well, this is perfect for you on how to do that. So it's microfamousbook.com/free, and you can get your digital book there. So Matt, brilliant having you on. I know that there's so many thought leaders out there that are thinking, how do I strategically launch a podcast that's going to work? And I know now who to send them to. So brilliant talking to you, and have a fantastic day.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate it.
Brilliant. Thanks, Matt. Bye. Thoroughly enjoyed that interview with Matt. He gave some awesome value, and I'm going to go and implement his suggestion on how to get on podcasts ASAP. I suggest you do the same. You can get all the show notes at buildlivegive.com. Love to know from you, though, what was your biggest takeaway from Matt? Please share on your socials mentioning Matt Johnson. He would love it. If you believe someone would get benefit from, Matt's thoughts on podcasting, please share it with them. You can learn the 3 steps to find and convert your ideal clients on LinkedIn in a free pre-recorded masterclass at blgclick.com. Please take action to build your business and lifestyle, and stay well.
Thank you for listening to the Build, Live, Give podcast. If you like what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review. It would mean the world to us.